On the evening of the 15th of December 1996, at around 11 pm, 12-year-old Celina Mays wished her family good night and headed up to bed. According to those who were present, nothing seemed out of place or strange. It was a day like any other. But the next morning, Selena's 4-year-old half-sister Nori is sent up by her mum to wake Selena up for breakfast and finds her bed empty. Pillows were arranged under the bed sheets to make it look like someone was in there, but she wasn't. At some point in the middle of the night, Selena had disappeared, and to this day, 28 years later, no one has a clue what happened to her. From that brief overview, you might think this was a 12-year-old girl running away in the middle of the night and getting into trouble. But in a case such as this one, you almost wish that that was the case, because it would turn out that 12-year-old Selena was 9 months pregnant at the time of her disappearance. Yes, 12 years old, 9 months pregnant. She was also living under the control of a strict church, a cult if you may, run by her aunt Sarita Smith. After her disappearance, it seems like the church closed ranks. An investigation by the police was made incredibly difficult. I really do hope that for the sake of Selena and her unborn baby, which was due just 2 weeks after her disappearance, that she did run away, that she did escape. I hope Selena made herself a safe life. I mean, there's no evidence to suggest that that was the case. There's no record of Selena ever giving birth in hospital, but that truly is the best case scenario here, because to think about the alternative is too awful. Poor little Selena had a really tough life. She lived through more in her 12 years than anyone should ever have to. She was born on the 28th of May 1984 to her parents Ninvatali and Crescenzo Mays, who everyone just knew as CJ. Selena was said to be a very fragile baby, and her parents weren't really doing the best. Lynn was an exotic dancer, a stripper. CJ was trying to be a musician and failing. The pair were drug and alcohol addicts. CJ was addicted to heroin, and there was a lot of domestic violence involved in this. It was an incredibly volatile relationship, and a kid really shouldn't have been in the middle of it. But Selena was. She was born, she was there, she lived through it. Eventually, Lynn and CJ split up. It was definitely for the best, and life got a bit easier for Selena. She stayed with her mum, and Lynn really did manage to sort her life out. She cleaned herself up, got a solid job working as a school custodian in Palmyra in New Jersey, and just made a really solid group of friends, like this really solid support system. For a while, Selena was living a really stable life with a mum who loved her enough to turn her entire life around. Neighbours in Palmyra said that Selena did seem to be a shy girl, but she did have friends, and her mum never ever let her out of her sight. Lynn was always there, always watching out for her daughter, like always just supporting her in any way whatsoever. Well, CJ apparently just disappeared completely. He didn't visit or keep up with his support payments. But then in 1992, Lynn sadly suffered with a brain aneurysm and suddenly died. Selena was understandably devastated. Her and her mum were absolute best friends. They did everything together. And now she was lost. Lynn's family, so Selena's maternal side, said that before her death, Lynn had told them that if anything was to ever happen to her, for them never ever to let Selena go to her father or his family. By this point, CJ had moved in with his sister, Sarita Smith, and he'd taken over the bookkeeping job of the church that she ran. So it does seem like CJ also cleaned himself up. He was no longer a drug addict, but he kind of went in the wrong direction again. And so, respecting Lynn's wishes, her family fought for custody of Selena. Her aunt Marilyn even tried to adopt her. But the courts granted CJ full custody. Selena was to go and live with her father and her whole paternal side of the family. And when I say live with the paternal side of her family, I literally mean it. She moved into a home on Crestview Drive in New Holly, New Jersey, into communal housing with at least 15 of her relatives. Her father, stepmother, step-siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it, they were all thrust into this same one house. Selena was now in the world of the Gospel of Christ Ministries Incorporated, which was the church run by her paternal aunt, so CJ's sister, Sarita Smith. From that day on, her whole life was overtaken by this church. It was a very insular community in which you would move from the home to the church, and that's pretty much it. She was homeschooled with the other children of the congregation. She would socialise with people in the congregation. Like, everything was tied up in the church. CJ would later say that at first Selena did seem to resist the religious atmosphere, which is literally zero surprise. Just imagine going from a very normal life where you just attend church on a Sunday with your mum like everyone else, and now you're thrust into what was essentially a cult. From the day she arrived, Selena would have had little to no contact with people outside the church. And according to former members of Gospels of Christ Ministries, that is exactly how the leaders planned it to be. They wanted to shut you off from the outside world, from outside communication, because that way there's more control. It's just typical cult stuff. One ex-member, Mayo Goldman, told the Enquirer that nothing is operated in their household without her consent, with her being Sarita Smith. She has a controlling spirit that's unreal. The littlest thing you can think of, she controls. Mayo said that when him and his wife got married without Sarita's permission, she stood them up at the pulpit in front of the entire congregation and chewed them out, telling them that the marriage was going to fail, it wasn't going to last, and that they would be punished for their disobedience. But apparently in just general life as part of the congregation, like, life was fine as long as you followed Sarita's rules. It was a cult, and this was the life that Selena was now being raised in. As long as you followed the rules, you're okay. You went outside of the rules, you would get told off. I feel like the use of the words told off really minimises what it was like, but you get what I was saying. Gospel of Christ Ministries Incorporated was a small Pentecostal church with around 50 or 60 congregation members, who all eventually would just make this church their entire life. You didn't only worship at this church every Sunday, you worked there, you socialised there, your children went to school there. As I said, it was incredibly insular. The worship sessions on a Sunday would run literally all day. There were often other services during the week. You worked there. If you didn't work there, you put your money into it. A lot of people would work on the side selling pretzels and selling like Mary Kay cosmetics, and all that money would just go back into the church. I want to say the followers were devoted, but I don't think devotion is quite the right word. Like, these people eventually just didn't have a choice. In the late 1990s, numerous former members came forward claiming that the church was using brainwashing techniques on its congregation. The day that Selena was last seen was the 15th of December 1996. The family had gone to church as normal and then returned home. They were sitting eating ice cream in the kitchen. They finished around 11 p.m. and Selena put her dishes in the sink and kissed everyone goodnight. According to reports, Selena told her stepmother Yvette, "Thanks for everything," which nobody really thought anything of at the time, but looking back, apparently they saw it as her maybe saying goodbye to them. But I would take this with a massive pinch of salt, because as you'll come to see, this case is a very tangled web of complicated family dynamics and people trying to protect people. Like, I wouldn't find it out of the question that somebody would make up Selena saying something like this just to try and cover their own backs as proof that she really did run away. I do usually try and keep my personal opinions out of these retellings, like, I'm here to share the story, not to cast judgments on everyone, but understandably this case absolutely boils my blood. We're dealing with a 9 months pregnant 12-year-old girl who seemingly didn't have anyone protecting her as much as they were protecting the church. And as I share more of the story, I'm sure your blood will also be boiling alongside mine. It's all beyond words. We'll talk about the situation surrounding the pregnancy in just a little bit, but I just want to set out the timeline of this disappearance first. It wasn't until the next morning, the 16th of December, that anyone realised that Selena had gone missing. Her 4-year-old stepsister Nori was sent by her mother, so Selena's stepmother Yvette, to go and get Selena up for breakfast. And Nori is now one of the most vocal people talking about this case. She literally did an interview with the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children about this just 2 months ago in May. She is still really trying to search for her sister and get the word out there. Nori is now 32 years old, and she said that she remembers being shielded from the chaos of Selena's disappearance. She was just 4 years old at the time, and understandably she wouldn't have the best memory ever of everything surrounding this, but she says she does remember that morning very clearly. When Yvette told her to go and get Selena, at first she just went upstairs, swung Selena's bedroom door open, and shouted there was time for breakfast before heading back downstairs. But when Selena then didn't emerge, Yvette sent Nori back upstairs, who shouted once again that it was time for breakfast. This time, when there was no response, Nori went into the room and pulled back the covers, finding nothing but pillows under the sheets. So then, little 4-year-old Nori goes back to her mother to report what she'd found, who apparently immediately called CJ, who was working at the church, to ask if Selena had maybe gone to work with him, but she hadn't. I couldn't find much information about the immediate search for Selena. I don't know if there was a panic, I assume there probably was, but the only source we have for this time is Nori. And like I said, she was 4 years old, she was very much shielded from what was going on, so she can't really remember. What we know for sure is that Selena was officially reported as missing to the police on the 17th of December, which is a whole day after she went missing. Apparently CJ walked into the police station to report this, which was interesting as most people just call in a panic, but CJ also told the police that Selena was going to come home, saying it was all in God's hands. A few days later, with Selena still missing, detectives then go to the family home to investigate, and in doing so was refused entry. CJ was now apparently refusing to cooperate. But it was discovered in this visit to the home that in reporting Selena as missing, CJ had failed to mention something quite important, that his missing 12-year-old daughter was 9 months pregnant. So yeah, let's talk about this pregnancy. Selena was due in just 2 weeks' time on the 29th of December, and considering that her own birthday was in May, that would have made her just 11 years old when she fell pregnant. 11 years old and somebody got her pregnant. You would think this would be a matter for the police, it is statutory rape, but her family never reported it. Any way you want to look at this, Selena was a child. She categorically could not consent to sex. But of course, that's not really the way that her family and the church saw things. It's said that her Aunt Sarita admonished Selena from the pulpit, and due to their very strong religious beliefs, an abortion was never really going to be an option here, even for an 11-year-old girl who was violated. So they took her to a local obstetrician who would care for her for the rest of her pregnancy. Now, I don't know if the obstetrician had any duty of care to report a pregnant 11, 12-year-old sitting across from her. I don't know what the laws were surrounding something like this in New Jersey in the 1990s. It was 1996. Like, would doctor-patient confidentiality have allowed for the doctor to share these details with the police? I would assume so, but I don't really know the legalities, and nor could I find them out. But you'd think so, wouldn't you? If anyone knows the answer to that, please leave a comment down below. Like, surely there must have been some sort of responsibility for the doctor to report it, but she didn't, so maybe there wasn't. I don't know, but I just cannot fathom that that would have been okay. Like, what? The doctor did later say to journalists that Selena was very emotionally mature for her age. I don't know whether that was some sort of explanation as to why she didn't report it. I really don't know. But I am pretty sure that anyone who had been through what Selena had been through in her very short life probably would have been more mature than her peers. But she was still just 12 years old. In the early days of the investigation, the police did agree that they thought Selena had run away. I mean, it does make sense that she'd want to escape the cult that she was now living in, especially because she'd grown up for 10 years not in a cult, and now here she was in a cult, like she wasn't liking it all that much. But they did also focus on finding out who the father of Selena's baby was, because that was the other big question here. The obstetrician said that Selena told her that the father was a 16-year-old boy that she'd met at a roller skating rink in neighbouring Camden County, which is about half an hour from Mount Holly. And reports are that she told her family the very same thing. But this was a girl who was kept under the thumb of the church. She was homeschooled. She wasn't allowed to socialise with people outside of the church. She was barely allowed to speak to her maternal side of the family. Everywhere that Selena went, her aunt and her dad knew about it. So it's wildly unbelievable that not only would Selena be allowed to go to a roller skating rink in a different county, but also she'd be allowed to go off grid long enough to fall pregnant. I mean, I know how it works, I know it can only take minutes to fall pregnant, but from the details that Selena and her family have shared, it kind of seems like Selena knew enough details about this boy to suggest that they'd spend an extended period of time together. How did her aunt not know who he was? Her aunt, Sarita, knew everything. So how did Selena get away with this? Yeah, I don't really believe the 16-year-old boy at roller rink theory for even a second, but maybe it was true. I don't personally think it was. Nori said that she was always told for years that Selena had slept around and got herself in trouble, that she met this man at a roller park in Camden and made bad choices. Nori said she believed this for years until family secrets eventually started to come out and she realised that that wasn't the case at all. We'll talk about said family secrets again in a bit, but once again, I just want to stress that Selena fell pregnant at 11 years old. This wasn't bad choices that she made, it was coercion. She was a child, she was violated. There was a lot of speculation around Selena's own father, CJ, being responsible for the pregnancy, especially due to his perceived strange behaviour around her disappearance. He was forced to share with the police that he'd actually had a vasectomy a couple of years beforehand, and therefore it was impossible for him to be the father. His own doctor had to provide his medical records to confirm this to the police. So CJ categorically was not the father of Selena's baby, which that can only be a good thing. And it's horrible to even speculate about it, but it had to be ruled out, and it was. But I do want to talk about CJ and his actions for a second, because it's very easy to make judgments on him in this case, and I'm not going to lie, I've spent a lot of time judging him in researching for this episode. But Nori, his youngest daughter and Selena's youngest sister, has said that she doesn't judge her father based on his actions. She said to crimeonline.com, "My aunt dictated my parents' marriage and everyone else's and their kids. I do not judge my dad or my mum for their inability to act out against the church. They were afraid, but they did everything they could to help find Selena." And this does feel like a stark reminder of how complicated things can be in cases like this one, particularly when we are talking about cults, about people being held under the power of others. CJ did report Selena as missing, but then apparently wasn't all that helpful with the investigation. However, Nori has said that he did do what he could, and I have read archived newspaper articles in which he is trying to raise awareness. He didn't exactly do what a lot of other parents probably would have done in the same position, but he did it in his own way. He was being held under the power of a cult, of his own sister. I mean, he quite easily could have just not reported Selena as missing at all, and because her life was so insular, people probably wouldn't have noticed. But he did it anyway. Apparently, when CJ found out that Selena was pregnant, it was him who fought for her to receive the best care possible from a highly sought-after obstetrician. Now, all of this information that I'm about to share with you comes from a Redditor called Ditzy_Shaman, who claims to have had close contact with this family. But please do take this with a pinch of salt. I couldn't clarify this for sure, but it seemed like legit enough for me to share it, but also not legit enough for me to be like, just take this with a pinch of salt, okay? It seems detailed enough to maybe be true, but I don't want to tell you with certainty that it is. But apparently CJ, according to this Redditor, was furious that his daughter had been assaulted, and he fought to have an amniocentesis done, which is basically where they take the amniotic fluid from around the baby and then test it, usually for genetic conditions, but it can also be used in paternity tests. CJ wanted to find out who had abused his daughter, and Selena was apparently very, very upset when she learned that this was an option, that this was something they could do. But CJ was ultimately warned against this by the obstetrician, who said that Selena's pregnancy was just too high risk. So CJ was odd, he did make some weird choices, he was clearly under the thumb of a cult, and nothing is ever really black and white, and CJ very much lived in the grey. But he did do what he could to try and fight for his daughter. He was warned against it by the obstetrician, he couldn't do it in the end, but we do know pretty much for sure that CJ did want to have paternity testing done. So whilst the rest of the details, as Register said, might not be true, we do know for sure that he did want a test done. But on the other hand, investigators have said that in the early days of the investigation, the family did hinder them. The police were just wanting to help, they wanted to find Selena, but the family refused to speak to them without an attorney. The investigators said it was just baffling behaviour. Like, at first the family weren't suspects of anything. They genuinely all thought that Selena had run away. But roadblocks were being put up at every single turn. They didn't seem to want to find Selena. No one in Selena's family went around knocking on doors or handing out leaflets. They just kept themselves to themselves. And the investigators just couldn't fathom this because she was 12 years old and she was about to give birth. Because of her age, because of the fact that her body wouldn't have been fully formed, the chances are that Selena would not have been able to have a vaginal birth because it's not natural for a child at 12 years old to be giving birth. The likelihood was that Selena was going to require a C-section. It was not going to be safe for her to give birth outside of a hospital without medical professionals looking after her. But the baby's due date passed and police could find no record of Selena or just any young girl giving birth in any hospital in the area. There's never been a baby registered as being the child of any Celina Mays. An obvious thread to follow in those early days was looking at Selena's maternal family, who have been incredibly outspoken about Selena's paternal family. They fought so hard to get custody of her and they failed, but they still tried to keep in contact as best they could, something that wasn't really made easy by Sarita and CJ. After Selena's disappearance, CJ would literally claim to the newspapers that her maternal family had taken her back to either Florida or Michigan, that they were responsible for her disappearance. And honestly, you probably couldn't blame them if that was the case. But CJ always claimed that the main reason they didn't like him was because he was black and they were white, they were racist. He claimed their hatred was always racially motivated. And I can't say categorically that that was not true, but I do think there were bigger issues at play here for Selena's mother's family. Like, they were concerned that Selena was in a cult. They didn't want Selena to be with that side of the family because they knew about all the churchy stuff. Like, that was their main issue. That's what they say anyway. They said that they don't believe Selena was happy in the church. Any communication she had with them once she joined the church was always overseen by CJ. Apparently, during one phone call with her half-brother Bob, they could hear CJ in the background shouting at her to get off the phone. Bob told Selena to give him a sign if she was unhappy by pushing a button on the telephone. She couldn't obviously say anything out loud because she was constantly being watched, but Bob said he heard a beep on the line as she pressed a button. So yeah, it wouldn't be surprising if her maternal family had snuck her away from the church. She told them that she was unhappy. But intense investigation has never uncovered any evidence that that was the case. They seem to be as desperate to find her as anyone else. Still to this day, they are desperate to find her. CJ literally said to the Courier Post in May 1997 that he believed some of Selena's paternal relatives had snuck her away and they're not letting her contact him. He also said in the same interview that Selena had made some bad choices in reference to her pregnancy. He attributed her disappearance to two main factors, saying that she was probably content right now just being a mother, and that with all the publicity currently surrounding this case, she was scared to come forward. He said, "I don't think she had any idea it would go this far, but she'll call once she starts pining for her father or gets in need." CJ has also always vehemently denied that the reason she ran away was anything to do with the church and her very strict lifestyle. She was just a girl who made bad choices, he said. For a really long time, everyone was sure that this was a runaway case, including the police. On January 25th, 1997, so just over a month after she disappeared, there was a promising lead when the owner of a Sizzlers restaurant in Howell, which is about 44 minutes away from Mount Holly, came forward saying he'd seen Selena come in with a group of people, including a pastor and a photographer. The man also said that she didn't appear to be pregnant, which would make sense, seeing as she would have been almost a month past her due date. Only the police followed up on this tip and ultimately they determined that the girl was not Selena. This was the biggest lead they ever really had in this case and it didn't go anywhere. Selena had simply just disappeared and without the full cooperation of her family, of the people who last saw her, there wasn't really loads the police could do. But looking back, the runaway theory never quite made sense in this case because Selena didn't take anything with her. She was very diligent about taking her prenatal vitamins, she was very switched on, she was a very smart young girl. If she was going to run away, she would take some things with her, but every single one of her belongings was found in her bedroom. Would she really have run away and not taken a single thing with her? When the runaway theory led nowhere, investigators did eventually turn their gaze on the family, exploring the idea that somebody within the family or the church had spirited Selena away to protect the identity of the baby's father. Spirited away has certain connotations. It suggests that she's alive and just being hidden away somewhere. But 28 years is a very long time to hide somebody away. So no, if this theory is correct, Selena was killed. But why? Why would her own family, her own community want to hurt her? And who within the family, within the community, would be the one to do it? Well, the potential answer to that comes in the form of her cousin, Sean Smith, who was 23 years old at the time of her disappearance and the son of Sarita. A couple of years after her disappearance in 1998, Sean was charged with the sexual assault of 2 minors who were also members of the Gospel of Christ ministries. One of the girls was 14 and the other was 13 when the assaults began, and he was charged with having sexual intercourse on multiple occasions with these 2 girls. Again, he was 23 years old. According to the complaint, Sean assaulted the first victim from 1992 to 1994 and the second from 1992 to 1995. He was arrested in the county courthouse after he appeared to testify in an unrelated child custody case, because by this point he already had multiple children by multiple different women, at least 5 children by 4 different women, including his wife. Originally, he was held on $50,000 bail in each charge, so $100,000 in total, but his attorney defended him as a responsible member of the community with a wife and 4 children living with him. So the judge agreed to combine the bail to just $50,000 for both. I couldn't find any details on whether or not Sean actually got convicted of these crimes. There's plenty about the arrest, but nothing about the trial, so I don't know. I'm assuming he didn't because it's not mentioned anywhere, but I don't know. I can't tell you for sure. But here is a man living in the same house as Selena who's been accused of sexual assault against 2 other minors also living in the same house. He was interviewed within days of her disappearance, so from early on the police did have their eyes on him, but he's never been officially named as a suspect in this case. And this is a really complicated one because if he was the one to impregnate Selena, it doesn't necessarily mean that he was the one to kill her, but it just all went so much deeper than that. The cover-up would have been a lot deeper, and I can only imagine that Sean's mother, Sarita Smith, would have wanted to do what she could to cover up what was going on, because it's not going to be looking good for her if her own son is impregnating not only his cousin, but his 11-year-old cousin. However, I did also see theories being thrown around online, and I do want to stress that this is all just theories, that Sarita was an advocate of reproducing in the church, or spreading the seed, and creating as many members as possible. I mean, her son did have multiple children by multiple different women, most of whom were born out of wedlock, so that wasn't a problem in this particular church. So could Sean have maybe been encouraged by his mother? But of course, a man is allowed to be promiscuous, a woman is a slut for doing the same thing. That's a whole other conversation. But could this be a reason why Sarita was so intent on making Selena seem like she had been the promiscuous one, that she just made wrong choices because she knew that her son was the one responsible? An article in the Trenton Times from January 1997 talks about 2 church members, women, who are pressing charges against their own mothers for trespass and harassment. Basically, there were 2 women called Deirdre and Sampanika who both had children fathered by a son of Sarita Smith, according to this article, who was most likely Sean. Their mothers, Aura and Linda, had been trying for years to get their daughters out of the church. They alleged their daughters had been brainwashed and were under mind control. When the mothers arrived at the church one day to speak to their daughters, they were ordered out and a fight ensued. Charges were filed. One of the women reportedly shouted, "Your pastor is a whore running a whorehouse. She is like a Jim Jones or David Koresh. You are in a cult." It's very interesting that these women accused Sarita of running a whorehouse. Rumours, theories like I just mentioned of spreading the seed have clearly been around for quite a while in relation to this church. These charges did actually go to trial in the end in May 1995, and the judge ended up dismissing all the charges, questioning the legitimacy of the church. The judge could see that something very weird was going on. He ordered them to be sort of looked into for tax things. It was a whole thing. Talking of crimes surrounding the church, in February 2013, a now 38-year-old Sean Smith was sentenced to 18 months for defrauding the charity that he worked at. He was sentenced to 3 years of supervised release and was ordered to pay over $100,000 in restitution. So Sean's crimes continued way past the 90s. And then in 2020, he died. CJ, Selena's father, also died in 2017, and Sarita died in 2018. The church is no longer operating, at least not as what it was, and there's no one left to answer the big questions that need answering around what went on in the 90s. There's no one left to confirm if the theories are correct. Sarita never fully let the investigators into their lives, and the investigators never got all the information required to hold a full investigation. Their early efforts to obtain a search warrant were blocked by a judge, and any other church officials are just impossible to get a hold of. They were always encouraged by Sarita to avoid cooperating with the police. So there was never really any chance of finding Selena, or finding answers, or finding out what exactly went on in between those four walls, inside those four walls. Anyone outside of the church could see that this was not a healthy environment, that the people under Sarita's power were being coerced, were being brainwashed, that something weird was going on. But if you were involved in the church, you were under Sarita's thumb. You did as she said, and if she said don't talk to the police, they didn't. And I'm sure if her son was indeed the father of Selena's baby, and some people inside the church, other children who were involved at this time, have come forward and said that they believe that he was, she's not going to want the police digging their nose around. She is going to do everything she can to keep them out of the church. This is a case in which runaway truly is the best scenario, and I do hope that Selena actually did run away. I hope that Selena escaped in the middle of the night, that she did maybe have an ally on the outside who hid her and helped her give birth. I hope it was an easy birth, that she didn't require a C-section in the end. That maybe now Selena is living elsewhere. She'll be 40 years old now, her child will be in their 20s, I think 27 if my maths is correct. I hope they're living a good life, that they're safe and happy. However, Selena did have her mother's very large life insurance policy to collect when she was 18, and she never did. Her maternal family say, as much as they want it to be the case that she did indeed run away, they can't understand why she's never made herself known to them if that was the case. She knew she was loved by them, and seeing as everyone else closer to this case, CJ, Sean and Sarita, have all died, there's no reason why she wouldn't come forward. But maybe she is just happy. Maybe she's put the trauma of her past behind her. Maybe she's living under a different name in a different state, or maybe even a different country. Like, that is best case scenario. The worst case scenario here is almost too awful to think about, that Selena was killed by somebody close to her in order to hide the fact that she was pregnant, and perhaps pregnant by her own cousin. Perhaps she was killed by said cousin to keep his name in the clear. I don't think there's any doubts that once the baby was born, CJ did intend to hold a paternity test. Likelihood is that they were going to find out the truth very imminently. If the father wanted to protect himself from going to prison on a statutory rape charge, there was a very limited amount of time left to fix that situation. There was just 2 weeks until the baby was due. Whilst I think it's clear that CJ made some very bad choices when it came to his daughter, when it came to protecting her, I don't think he entirely knew what was going on under that roof. I don't think he knew about the assaults that were going on. I think he did try to protect Selena in the best way he could. He wanted to find out who the father of her baby was, and he was going to stop at nothing to do that. And that maybe was the downfall. I don't think CJ had a hand in his daughter's disappearance. I just think he acted a little bit weird after the fact. But he wasn't a cult. He was being held under the power of his sister. Or perhaps something bad happened in the night. Maybe Selena went into labour a couple of weeks early, maybe things went pear-shaped and she died. Although clearly CJ did make sure that Selena had a good obstetrician, she wasn't being hidden away from the medical world. They weren't hiding her pregnancy. So I can't quite fathom why, if she went into labour, they wouldn't call an ambulance or get her to hospital or call the obstetrician. Her going into labour and something bad happening makes sense until you actually think about it, and then it doesn't. Like, they weren't hiding her pregnancy, so why would they not call the ambulance? And besides, this was a communal home with 15 plus family members living in it. Like, surely somebody would have heard something, some sort of commotion. No one living in that house has ever said they heard anything going on in the night. Investigators truly don't know what to think about this case. Selena is officially classified as endangered missing, and it's not being actively investigated as a homicide. It is just a missing persons case. Nori May, Selena's younger half-sister, is still incredibly active in trying to get this case solved. She just wants answers. She said to NCMEC, "I know crime shows and crime junkies want to know everything about my sister's case, but you have to realise there is a broken family behind these stories. It's not just Celina Mays went missing in 1996. Did her family have something to do with it? I'm asking for a bit of grace here because it's not every day your kid goes missing." She said that what motivates her in her search is the fact that she doesn't want to believe that her family are as evil as they've been portrayed to be. She just wants answers, whatever they may be. She just wants to know what happened to her sister and who was responsible. She wants to know for sure. She knows her aunt was not a good person, but she does defend her father. She says he didn't know what to do, he was under the control of a cult, and he did what he could do with what he had. Detective Monica Pogorzelski with the Willingboro Police Department has since taken over this case, and she says she does remain hopeful that Selena and her child may still be alive. After 28 years, this is still an open investigation. They've never given up on it. They just want to give Selena's family the answers that they deserve. The Gospel of Christ Ministries is now an abandoned building, and investigators are seeking any information the police may have about this church when it was in operation. They say no detail is too small. They're looking for community members and people who worked at the church who maybe haven't already shared their stories. Many old members of the congregation still refuse to speak, probably out of fear, but now Sarita has passed, now Sean has passed, they're hoping more people might have something to say. They have been making efforts to distribute an age-progressed photo of Selena. This photo depicts what she may have looked like at 37 years old, so 3 years ago now, and they're hoping that somebody might recognise her. If Selena is still alive, police want to know, and what she does next, if she is alive, is entirely up to her. Like, her identity now doesn't have to be made public, she doesn't have to reconnect with anyone, they just want to know. But if she's moved on, if she's happy, do we want to disturb that? Like, do we want to dredge up the past for Selena if she is alive? But on the other hand, if she's not alive, then further investigation does need to be done. Like, people in the church need to come forward and share anything that they have. Anyone with any information on Selena's disappearance is urged to call the National Centre of Missing and Exploited Children or the Willingboro Police Department, and I'll leave both numbers down below. This was an incredibly tough case for me to research. I cried so much in researching this case. I've managed to hold it together for actually relaying it to you, but this was a really, really rough one to talk about for me. It was just, my heart breaks for Selena. She was just 12 years old and she went through just the most horrific things you can imagine. Like, even if it does turn out the story about her cousin isn't true, like, she was still violated, she was still abused, she was still living in a cult. She had her mum die when she was just 10 years old, who was her best friend. She dealt with her parents being abusive and addicts, and it makes me so incredibly sad for her. I do truly, truly hope that she just managed to escape, that she is now living elsewhere under a different name, under a different identity, and she is just living her happiest life possible. But I don't know how likely that is. I hope that's the case. I really do. I'm going to tell myself it is. Rhubarb decided to join me for the outro here, so if you heard purring in the microphone in that last bit, it is just her. We haven't had co-host Rhubarb with us for a while, have we? We haven't. Everything's a little bit easier when you've got a purring cat on your lap. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. As always, if you like what I'm doing here on my channel, please make sure you show your support in any way you can. Give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, subscribe to this channel. I can see all of you who are not subscribed. I see you watching and not subscribing. Just do it. I upload every Wednesday, sometimes Thursday. I upload at least once a week. And yeah, it'd be great if you could subscribe and show your support that way. I also have my channel membership, so just £2.99 a month if you are feeling particularly generous. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.